Hi guys, this is Chloe and welcome back to my channel. But as you can see by the title, I did get a custom wheelchair and I'm going to talk you through everything I had to go through to get the wheelchair, as well as some tips and tricks that I learned along the way and how I got it approved so quickly. So I'm super excited to get into this video, and on that note, we're going to get started. So this is what my wheelchair looks like now. I'm going to pop a photo of it. And I know y'all are going to want to know more about the literal wheelchair itself, and I'm going to do a separate video on that, and that'll come out later. For right now, we're just getting into how I obtained the wheelchair. But again, that other video is coming out soon. And basically, I had spoken to my physical therapist because I have an off-the-shelf manual foldable wheelchair from a family friend. I'm going to try to pop a photo of it so you can see. And it was just not working for me. It was very boxy and I was getting frustrated because it wasn't working very well. And I spoke to my physical therapist and I hinted that I wanted to entertain the idea of going custom by bringing that wheelchair in and showing her how hard it was for me. And she's like, yeah, you need to go custom. So I called my health insurance and I said, hey, I want to go for a custom wheelchair. What are the steps that I need to go through? Now, I have Anthem as my primary and then Medicaid as my secondary, state funded at that. And the thing is that with my primary insurance, I can use it out of state, and I go to and from Hershey to meet with my spina bifida doctors with that. However, with the Medicaid, so I'm working on getting a reciprocal claim where I'm allowed to use my Medicaid up in Hershey, but basically, in order for Medicaid to be used for this wheelchair, the person prescribing it has to not only be in network with Medicaid, but they have to be licensed to practice in my state. So that meant my Hershey doctors were out because that, reciprocal claim hadn't been approved yet and is still not approved. I went with my primary care physician, and before I went into my in-person appointment, I started researching places that I wanted to go to. Chloe from the future, I forgot to leave out one big thing. So how does one go about finding a seating and mobility clinic? Glad you asked. So there's a bunch of different ways. So number one, obviously, if you're in the emergency room or in a rehab unit and cannot leave without a wheelchair, then they'll take care of that for you. Number two is if you go to spina bifida clinic or you go to another multi-specialty clinic like a cerebral palsy or whatever, then all of those clinics are attached to a healthcare system or hospital, and most of them have seating and mobility clinics. Number three is if they don't have a seating and mobility clinic, then at clinic, if you have a social worker, you can ask them or the person that's prescribing your wheelchair, and they will both give you pointers on where to go and who people have loved. This also works if you do not like the seating and mobility clinic at your local hospital. And number four is Anthem and my state funded Medicaid have this, but you can go on your patient portal and you can search for the type of care that you need and it'll spit out what's in network, but it'll only spit out what's in network with their insurance. So like, for instance, if I said that I needed like seating and mobility specialist and I go through Anthem, Anthem's only going to say whether or not they're in network with Anthem. They're not going to say if they're in network with state funded Medicaid, which leads me to my fifth one. But you can also Google places and you can give them a call and see if they're in network with your Medicaid and any other type of insurance. And then number 6 is support groups. Whether you do them virtually or in person, you can ask the question and see who people in your state have used. Okay, back to the video. And this was around like October or November when I started this process. And I had looked into Shepherd Center, which is the largest rehab center in the state of Georgia. And it's for people with spinal cord injuries. But they accept people with all types of like mobility impairments and stuff in their seating and mobility clinic. I gave them a call, and it was a 2 to 3 month wait just to get in for an appointment for their seating and mobility clinic. And the thing is that it was towards the end of the year, and I was really close to meeting my out-of-pocket maximum, and I wanted this wheelchair before the new year. So I was thinking in my mind, okay, they're out. But then I forgot that I had an in with Shepherd, but it didn't matter. I still ended up looking at other places. Then I looked into Emory, but they got rid of their seating and mobility clinic, so they were out. And then, not sponsored, but I looked into a place called New Motion, and it's basically a community-based clinic. And they have them all around the United States, but basically they come to you for everything. So for the evaluations, and they deliver the chair, and they also come to you for any repairs. And it's not like a hospital-based setting or anything like that. So I'm like, okay, that's my winner. And before you go into the appointment, it's best to think about why you need a wheelchair and how it pertains to needing a wheelchair pertains to your disability. So for instance, I have spina bifida, and I cannot walk long distances without getting fatigued. So that's why I wanted the wheelchair. I'm also using it for energy conservation as recommended by my doctors. I went in, met with the doctor, and I must have been in the right place and the right time, because my doctor said that there was a wheelchair company that had just come in, their brand rep had come in, and they sounded really good and knowledgeable and promising. And he gave me their info, and he knew that I had New Motion in mind, but they're, it may be a good idea to look into these people too. So I'm like, okay. And they were called AbleTech. And basically with AbleTech, I had the doctor send everything away to AbleTech. And then I looked them up. They're a small family-owned practice, which was great because my orthotist, they are a small family-owned practice, and they have never, ever, ever done wrong by me. So I wholeheartedly support them, and hopefully I'll get my wheelchair a lot quicker because they won't be as busy. So they called me. I gave them all of my information as far as insurances and stuff. And I didn't hear back from them for a little bit. So I gave them a call only to find out that they were not in network with my primary, but in network with my Medicaid. And by law, they have to bill both insurances, regardless if they're in network or not. And since my Anthem is primary and not secondary, it would have taken a lot longer because they weren't in network and stuff, but they were really good about it. And they said, hey, you're really close to meeting your out-of-pocket maximum. You're better off going with another company. So I'm not dissing AbleTech by any means. It's just that my doctor didn't know that they were not in network with my primary, which I did ask if they were in network with both of them before I decided to go with AbleTech and had my doctor send everything away. I should have clarified that. So I gave New Motion a call, and I had asked if they were in network with both of my insurances and that I wanted to get a wheelchair from them. And they asked if it was my first time getting a wheelchair through insurance, and I said yes. And they said that health insurance doesn't give out wheelchairs all willy-nilly. So, for instance, if you have a heart condition, they're not going to cover it. And they started going into their spiel. And I said, it was a guy, and I said, "Sir, I have spina bifida." And he goes, "Oh yeah, they're definitely going to cover that." So I had my doctor send everything away to New Motion, and that didn't take very long at all. My doctor, primary care physician, is chef's kiss and took care of it right away. So shout out to him and his assistant for getting that taken care of. And basically, after they got the paperwork, New Motion gave me a call and said that they have someone called an assistive technology coordinator, and they had asked me if I had a physical therapist, and I said yes, and they said that they were going to have the physical therapist pop in on one of my PT appointments, and she was going to do a wheelchair eval there. And I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of cool. And I really liked what they were doing. And they ended up having a cancellation on my PT day, so they just decided to have the wheelchair eval on that day of the cancellation, which ended up being like the next day after they had called. Before going into this appointment, I looked at both of my insurances to see what would be covered as far as the wheelchair. And basically with both of them, the wheelchair had to be medically necessary. And with my Medicaid, that's it. As long as it's medically necessary, they'll pay for anything and everything for the chair that I needed. And B, though, with Anthem, it has to be, the item on the chair has to be medically necessary and not a luxury. And that could differ for different people. So for instance, you know, let's say I wanted a mount to mount my phone so I could film myself. They would deny that. However, let's say I have a friend who has spina bifida and is autistic and uses an AAC device to communicate and wanted that mount to be covered by insurance, then they would be more than likely to cover it because there's a medical necessity for it, whereas for mine, there wasn't. Before I came into the appointment, I had a list of questions that I had for her, and they were all answered during the appointment. I didn't have to ask those questions because she was talking me through the whole process, and my PT, and my physical therapist had to sign off on some things, and I had to sign off on some things too, and she basically wasn't able to give me a trial wheelchair or anything for me to use because there are so many wheelchairs out there that if they were to keep them all in stock, they would be bigger than a Walmart. And we went through the whole process of obtaining the chair, and I got to pick out the color of my chair, what features I wanted on it, stuff of the like. Then afterwards, she said she was going to obtain quotes from the supplier that has all the parts for my wheelchair. So to put this in perspective, for example, Oreo cookies. You know, Oreo cookies are made by one person and they're distributed to a bunch of different stores. And all the stores can basically ask for these Oreo cookies to be carried in their store. And that's the same exact thing with the wheelchair company that I used. You know, I ended up going with Permobile, and I ended up getting a Tyalite Z. Pardon my French, but I ended up getting an X and not an Aero Z. Okay, back to the video. But basically, they work with Permobile, and Permobile will send them all the parts that they need, and they'll build the wheelchair in-house. So she got the quotes, and that roughly took about a week. And then afterwards, everything was sent back to my primary care physician to approve before it got sent away to be prior authorized by both of my insurances. Because once it's prior authorized, that's it. Like, you can't add anything without having to pay out of pocket. They approved of everything, and everything got sent to be prior authorized. And Medicaid, ironically, first, I was checking my, like, patient portal for Medicaid, and it said there were 2 claims in there, and one was suspended and the other one was denied. And this was like 3 to 4 days after everything was sent away, and they had gotten it. And I was like really, upset, but knew that it could happen. Denials can happen. And I remember, to get religious here, but I was praying to God that night, hoping my wheelchair would be covered. And the next day I checked the portal, and one of the claims had switched from, suspended to approved. So that was great. But basically with both the claims, it was literally the same thing, but I'm wondering if they screwed up on the first one, and my company NuMotion that I used had to submit again, which could have been. And then, I waited 2 to 3 days for Anthem to approve of it, and they didn't. So basically what you can do, pro tip, is you can call them, like your health insurance, and with some of them, they'll allow you to speak to their prior authorization team, but also you can always call and ask for a status update on a prior authorization. All you have to do is tell them what date everything got submitted or when you started the process, and they will let you know. So if you don't have a reference number, you can always go by that. So I basically called Anthem. I started on a Monday, and I said, "Hello, I'm going for a wheelchair and I need it prior authorized, and I was wondering what the status update was and if I could be transferred to the prior authorization and management team." The people on the other line, I forget their names, it's slipping my mind right now, but they said that they could not transfer me to the prior authorization and management team because that's for providers only. However, they could give me a status update, and they said it was pending. So I'm thinking in my mind, okay, you want to play that game, do you? So I called them every single day and asked the same thing. And by that next Monday, I gotten an email from Anthem stating that it was approved. So I was actually in the waiting room of an attorney's office when I gotten it approved. So after my meeting, I gave NuMotion a call and told them the good news. It's been approved. However, on their end, it didn't show as approved, and they couldn't order the parts until, they got the approval in their system. And once they got the approval, they ordered all the parts, and then the parts came in, and they started building my wheelchair, and this was around January-ish when that happened. And then we had a delivery date scheduled. However, because of the snow and ice, their manager, my assistive technology coordinator's manager, said that it was not safe for her to go out there because even though there was no snow on the ground, because they had gotten to above freezing, and only got to above freezing for a little bit, and then it got back down to below freezing again. And everything had basically froze over, and it hadn't gotten to above freezing by the time my appointment was supposed to happen. So we rescheduled for the next day, only for me to get a phone call a couple hours later. And when my liaison, who puts me in touch with the assistive technology coordinator, etc., took a look, everything was on there except for the back of my wheelchair, and he was going to find out why it wasn't on there. So he spoke to the assistive technology coordinator, and apparently, pun intended, the back of my wheelchair was on back order, and they said it wouldn't be here till the end of January. And I was like, ugh. And then at the end of January, the part came. It was an easy install on the back of the chair. And then after it was like put on and stuff, we had an appointment scheduled. But the thing is that my liaison forgot to coordinate with the assistive technology coordinator, because she has to be there to sign off on everything. And she was unable to do that day. The soonest they could get her out there was like in a week. And I didn't like that answer. And I understand that, these types of people are overworked and underpaid, and there's a shortage. So I asked if I could go in person and pick it up and if she'd be around. And he said yes, and we were able to pick it up within 2 days instead of having to wait a full week. So I decided to do that. I went in, and I had to wait in the waiting room, and then the assistive technology coordinator brought me back. We went over the wheelchair and the specs. She taught me how to break it down, etc. And then afterwards, she signed off on some paperwork. I signed off on some paperwork. After we both signed off on some paperwork, then I was able to take my wheelchair with me. But I will say, the whole process was very frustrating. New Motion did an incredible job. They were not the issue. It's just the way that you have to obtain it by getting a face-to-face and all that other stuff. And it's a lot harder to get a wheelchair than it is to get a luxury handbag or other types of things here in the United States. We shouldn't have to go through all these hoops. And yes, I understand that they're expensive, but that's no excuse, because luxury items like Chanel purses and stuff like that are more expensive, and yet we don't have to have a face-to-face for those. Heck, we could just buy them online if we wanted to and have them shipped to our door. But that's my 2 cents, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox any further because I don't want to bore you guys to death or get into politics. So I will also have a couple of templates linked in my Google Drive. All you have to do is go to the link in the description, and basically it'll take you right to the folder with all those templates. The first one is going to be a checklist of all the steps that you have to go through to obtain the wheelchair. The second one will just be a blank template in case if you need to ask questions. And then the third one will be what I want in a wheelchair. And then the fourth one will be why I want a wheelchair as it pertains to your disability. And just some tips about that. And there may be some others in there that I may eat, but that's all I know that I'm going to be doing for now. That's basically it. I thank you guys so much for watching this video and cannot wait to see you guys again soon. And also comment down below your experiences of getting a wheelchair.